Hello YouTube fam and welcome to my channel. I was going to do a nice little face-to-face video of myself, but after recording about 2011 takes and realizing that I look like I've had a stroke on camera when I'm nervous, I decided to do a podcast instead so that my nervousness won't detract from my message. Hopefully as I get more comfortable, I'll start doing more face-to-face videos. So let me introduce myself. My name is Sylvia. I'm a proud wife and mom, and I teach young adults for a living. Actually, I'm going back to work on Monday, so my summer break is almost over. And as you can see from the YouTube handle, I used to be a Jehovah's Witness, and obviously I'm not one anymore. So a lot of the videos on this channel will be based on the reasons why I've gone toward the direction of not being one. I'd like to also do a little bit of vlogging, depending on how this channel goes and how comfortable I am in front of the camera. Today I'll be giving my commentary about a major development in the Jehovah's Witness child sex abuse scandal. There are probably a lot of commentary videos out there on this topic, and I'll post some of the really interesting ones that I've already watched on this issue in the description box. But I hope you can take a bit of time out of your schedule to hear my humble opinion on this issue. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this topic, either you've never been a Jehovah's Witness, you're not too familiar with them, or you currently are a Jehovah's Witness, but you haven't watched the news regarding these topics. Dozens of cases in the past 2 decades have been filed from victims who said that they were sexually abused in the Jehovah's Witness religion. While some of these have been settled out of court, a huge number of these cases have gone to trial, and the vast majority of them have had rulings in favor of the complainants or the individuals who are victimized by the abuse. So the major development is the implementation of the Child Victims Act in the state of New York. This act was actually signed on February 14th, 2019, and it was going to be implemented exactly 6 months from that date. So on August 14th, 2019, that act actually became active. And so the act provides for child sex abuse victims to file civil lawsuits against their attackers without having to worry about the statute of limitations. And the act gives those people a year to go ahead and file those suits without having to worry about the statute of limitations. Unfortunately for the Jehovah's Witness religion, this left them wide open for civil suits, since their headquarters is in the state of New York. So this led to a press conference where 2 victims actually came out with their stories and their intent to sue under this new act. So at first, this may seem like another lawsuit, but the significance of this is that this act actually allowed the members of the governing body to be included in this suit directly. So that's the difference here. The actual governing body members are directly included in this lawsuit, so they're basically having to account for themselves and answer to this lawsuit. And so I'll put the articles as far as this act and those specific lawsuits in the description box, and you could actually look online to actually see the full press conference. And honestly, the details of what happened to those 2 individuals was very sickening, very disturbing, and I really hope that they're able to get justice and that the people who are named in this suit are held accountable. So what I wanted to do was address the 2 common arguments that Jehovah's Witnesses will bring up when defending their religion when these accusations are brought up, either by people outside of their religion or by former Jehovah's Witnesses. The first one that JW leaders in New York have specifically brought up is a 2-witness rule. The leaders on video have explicitly said in response to the child sex abuse allegations that they will never deviate from this rule because it's based on the Bible. So what does this rule entail? Well, it basically states that if someone in the religion is accused of a serious crime or sin, that at least 2 witnesses are required to establish guilt. So let's read more about this rule at Deuteronomy 19:15. And since I'm discussing Jehovah's Witnesses and their doctrines, I will be reading any scriptural references from the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures. which is the Bible that they commonly use. Now, I have my own opinion on this Bible, and I know people watching this will have varying opinions on the Bible itself, but for the sake of this argument, I'll be using it to address the issues brought up. So at Deuteronomy 19:15, it says, "No single witness may convict another for any error or any sin he may commit. On the testimony of 2 witnesses or on the testimony of 3 witnesses, the matter should be established." So Jehovah's Witnesses watching this video right now, if there are any, are probably saying at this point, aha, see? The Bible supports our stance on this. But let us look at the entire context of this scripture. It was written as part of the Mosaic law that the Israelites, God's chosen people, were to follow. And there were actually other laws that did specifically address matters such as sexual assault. Let's look at one of those now at Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 25 through 27. And here it reads, "If, however, the man happened to meet the engaged girl in the field, and the man overpowered her and lay down with her, the man who lay down with her is to die by himself, and you must do nothing to the girl. The girl has not committed a sin deserving of death. This case is the same as when a man attacks his fellow man and murders him. For he happened to meet her in the field, and the engaged girl screamed, but there was no one to rescue her." So there was a provision made that if a woman was violated in a field, which is an isolated area, the perpetrator was punished, and in this case, he was put to death for his actions. In this case, no other witnesses were present to see the crime, but the man was punished regardless. Likewise, how often do you see child predators committing their perverted acts in front of more than one person? Typically, as in the case of many of these pedophiles in the congregation, they take their victims to isolated areas where they know they won't be caught or seen. So in this case, shouldn't they also be held accountable, disfellowshipped, or expelled at least to truly protect the congregation? These are things I want you to think about if you happen to be a Jehovah's Witness watching my video. An actual example that also came to mind while I was working on this video was the account of Dinah in Genesis 34. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses love talking about this account to reinforce the so-called dangers of bad association, namely people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. But I thought about this account in another light. Remember what ultimately happened after Dinah was raped? Her brothers, Simeon and Levi, not only took out her rapist, they killed all the men in that land. Now, when you think about it, that's a pretty extreme thing to do. But what happened to them? Did Jacob, their father, the man who was basically the forefather of the Israelites, immediately kick them out of the household and disown them? He might have reprimanded them because what they did do was an extreme act. But it was made clear in the Bible that they still remained in the household. In fact, Moses, the descendant of Levi, ended up being instrumental in freeing the Israelites from slavery and recording the laws that they followed. But what typically happens when a child in a Jehovah's Witness household is sexually abused? Well, a lot of the civil complaints that were filed speak for themselves. In many cases, the elders discourage the victims and their parents from going to the police, even threatening them with shunning or loss of congregational privileges if they did so. In some cases, the parents themselves discourage their own children from seeking justice, expecting him or her to forgive the predator and leave it in Jehovah's hands. Likewise, some of these victims have been or are being shunned by their own families for taking it to the authorities or pursuing legal action. Now tell me, is this truly proving your case that you are God's chosen people? Another argument that Jehovah's Witnesses will mention is that child sex abuse is a problem among many religions and that it's unfair to focus on them. And I definitely do acknowledge that. I do believe that sometimes religion is used to prey on the vulnerable and those who sometimes trust them more than their own intuition. Jehovah's Witnesses will commonly bring up the Catholic Church and their major sex abuse scandal to minimize their own. So in preparing this video, I decided to compare the policies on these two religions. Now, both of them are hugely guilty of covering up many cases of sexual abuse in the past, so I'm not siding with one or the other. But analyzing how each religion addressed this issue was really interesting. So both religions publish statements on this issue to the public, and these are available online, but I'll provide links to them in the description box. They're pretty lengthy, so I'll mainly focus on parts that stuck out to me personally and compare those. I'll start with the Catholic Church. So on May 7th, 2019, Pope Francis issued his motu proprio, hope I'm pronouncing that right, specifically spelling out their process for investigating child sex abuse complaints. When I printed out this document, it was 10 pages long and rather detailed, but one part stuck out to me, so I'll read that part directly. The crimes of sexual abuse offend our Lord, cause physical, psychological, and spiritual damage to the victims, and harm the community of the faithful. In order that these phenomena, in all their forms, never happen again, a continuous and profound conversion of hearts is needed, attested by concrete and effective actions that involve everyone in the church, so that personal sanctity and moral commitment can contribute to the full credibility of the gospel message and effectiveness of the church's mission. This becomes possible only with the grace of the Holy Spirit poured into our hearts, as we must always keep in mind the words of Jesus, "Apart from me, you can do nothing." Even if so much has already been accomplished, we must continue to learn from the bitter lessons of the past, looking with hope towards the future. The Jehovah's Witness statement to the public was released in April of 2018. When I printed theirs out, it was about 3 pages long versus the 10-page Catholic statement, and one of those pages was references to their own literature. To me, that kind of spoke volumes in itself, but let me read the statement that stuck out to me in their document. Jehovah's Witnesses abhor child abuse and view it as a crime. We recognize that the authorities are responsible for addressing such crimes. The elders do not shield any perpetrator of child abuse from the authorities. So the thing I noticed in both of the statements is that they did refer to child abuse as a crime. Now it's interesting to me that in more recent Watchtower articles published after this statement, Jehovah's Witnesses constantly referred to it as a sin or a gross sin, but I guess that's besides the point. But I am glad at least that they both acknowledged that it specifically is a crime. Now the Catholic statement specifically acknowledged the psychological effects that abuse can have on an individual. But I felt that the Jehovah's Witness statement kind of brushed that off. While they did say that seeking professional help was a conscience matter, the language did not sound like it was encouraging it. Just like they don't encourage victims to go to the authorities, I guess. The biggest thing to me outside of these statements is that the Catholic Church did offer a public apology to the victims, and on their part acknowledged the errors on how they handled things in the past. Well, what about the Jehovah's Witnesses? To date, they have not issued a public apology to the victims or of how they, or the men they appointed as leaders, handled past cases. They did not apologize on behalf of the so-called men of God who intimidated innocent victims and threatened to take away everything they've known. They have yet to acknowledge their failure to follow even local laws of mandatory reporting. They refuse to admit that it's a huge problem and that their current policies, both those that are publicly known and those secretly shared to their most trusted, need to be reviewed and amended. So yes, Jehovah's Witnesses aren't the only ones dealing with this issue, but the way your leaders have handled things does set you apart, and not in a good way. So I think this act and lawsuit is a really good development. I'm really glad that the governing body has directly been asked to account for their negligent and unloving actions, and I really hope justice is served for these people. As far as it being the beginning of the end of this organization, well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So if you've watched this video to the end, thank you. I hope I haven't bored you too much. If you're interested in supporting this channel and hearing more of my story, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And stay tuned for my next video. Much love.